Hello, welcome to the review of the Division II 2022 NCAA Convention proposals. This presentation will provide you with an introduction to and overview of the proposals set to be voted on by the membership. Let's start by talking about the publications associated with convention. As a note, similar to last year, all publications will only be posted to the Legislative Actions and Issues page on the NCAA website and will not be available in hard copy. The first is the initial publication of proposed legislation, or the IPOPL. This is produced every year by August 15th and contains the membership-sponsored proposals that were properly sponsored by the July 15th deadline. This year, the IPOPL was released on August 13th. The second publication of proposed legislation, or the SOPOPL, is published every year by September 23rd. This document contains the membership-sponsored proposals that were included in the IPOPL, as well as the President's Council and Board of Governors sponsored proposals. In terms of the order for the SOPOPL, these publications have the proposals listed in the order that they may appear in the manual. The next publication is the official notice. That document is released November 15th. The official notice is essentially a guide to the business session at convention. The white pages contain the membership-sponsored proposals and the President's Council and Board of Governors sponsored proposals in the order in which they will be voted on at the business session. Additionally, the blue pages contain all of the legislative actions taken by the Management Council since the membership last met at convention. This includes all non-controversial and emergency proposals. Lastly, the question and answer guide is released to the membership via the NCAA website, but is not released in hard copy. This document contains the commonly asked questions regarding the convention proposals. It is released every year in early December. So now that we have done an overview of the publications associated with convention, let's dive right into the 2022 convention proposals. Proposal 2-1 will amend the legislative authority and process in a few ways. Under the current legislation, the Division II President's Council, or, in the interim between the meetings of the President's Council and the Management Council, the Administrative Committee, has the authority to adopt emergency legislation when the NCAA must respond to or comply with a court order, ADR, or government order, or when the President's Council deems it appropriate to limit or avoid NCAA liability as a result of litigation, ADR, or governmental proceedings. The President's Council also has the authority to adopt resolutions that are temporary in nature. Further, the President's Council may call a special convention of Division II to vote on amendments to Division Dominant and Federated provisions. If adopted, Proposal 2-1 will permit the Division II President's Council to adopt emergency legislation when significant values or harm are at stake and the use of the regular legislative cycle is likely to cause undue hardship to the association or the Division II membership due to delay in its effective date. It will also reduce the special convention deadline for Division Dominant and Federated provision amendments sponsored by the President's Council from 90 days to 30 days. Finally, it will permit the President's Council to sponsor and adopt resolutions at any time, with those resolutions being ratified by the Division II membership at the next regularly scheduled NCAA convention. Due to COVID-19, there were instances where the division needed to act immediately, but the action did not fit under the scope of the emergency authority or resolution requirements. This proposal will enhance the current scope of emergency legislation so that the division can act accordingly. In addition, the change would permit adoption of a resolution at a time other than convention, while still requiring final ratification at the convention. Finally, with advances in technology and possible situations that require a more expedient resolution, it is possible to arrange for a special convention in a much shorter period of time if needed. If adopted, this proposal will have an immediate effective date. Proposal 2-2 will amend the notification of transfer, one-time transfer, and financial aid legislation in the following ways. It will require an undergraduate transfer student-athlete to complete an educational module related to transferring before an institution may enter the student-athlete's information into the NCAA transfer portal. It will also require the head coach of the certifying institution and the student-athlete to certify in writing that no athletic staff member or other representatives of the institution's athletics interest communicated or made contact with the student-athlete or any individual associated with the student-athlete directly or indirectly without first obtaining authorization through the notification of transfer process. It will also eliminate the previous institution's ability to object to the one-time transfer exception. Proposal number 2-2 will also establish June 15th as the date by which a student-athlete must provide written notification to their institution in order to utilize the one-time transfer exception. This date is not applicable to mid-year transfers. Finally, the proposal will permit an institution to reduce or cancel an athletics aid agreement previously signed for the next academic year. If adopted, this proposal will have an immediate effective date for student-athletes transferring for the 2022-23 academic year and thereafter. This proposal addresses the evolving transfer landscape by balancing student-athlete well-being and institutional enrollment management concerns. To encourage informed transfer decisions, a transferring undergraduate student-athlete will be required to complete a mandatory educational module before their information may be entered into the transfer portal. Further, to deter the impermissible influence on a student-athlete's desire to transfer, an institution's head coach and the student-athlete will be required to certify that no contact occurred prior to the student-athlete's entry into the transfer portal. The June 15th date will ensure institutions can make necessary decisions for the upcoming academic year before the July 1st financial aid renewal deadline. Finally, the proposal will permit an institution to cancel an athletics aid agreement signed for the next academic year if a student-athlete requests to be entered into the transfer portal while still making it impermissible for an institution to reduce or cancel a student-athlete's athletics aid during the academic year in which the student-athlete provides notification. Turning to Proposal 2-3, under the current legislation, before a prospective student-athlete or currently enrolled student may try out, they are required to undergo a medical examination which must include a sickle cell solubility test unless documented results of a prior test are provided or the prospective student-athlete or student declines the test and signs a written release. Similarly, prior to participation by a student-athlete beginning their initial season of eligibility, they are required to undergo a medical examination that must include a sickle cell solubility test unless documented results of a prior test are provided to the institution or the student-athlete declines the test and signs a written release. If adopted, Proposal number 2-3 will eliminate the option to sign a written release or waiver declining the sickle cell solubility test as specified. Relevant consideration related to the administration of sickle cell solubility tests, privacy burdens, and institutional management of care of the trait-positive individuals have evolved since the adoption of the original legislation. Since there is now an opportunity for schools to efficiently and effectively manage the administrative and privacy burdens tied to the tests, the benefits related to the appropriate monitoring of sickle cell trait-positive student-athletes support the idea of consistent mandatory testing across institutions. The Committee on Competitive Safeguards of Medical Aspects of Sport does not intend that a positive test become the basis for an automatic grounds for disqualification from athletics participations. Rather, test information should be used by institutional and other applicable medical staff to provide individualized medical care and monitoring. If adopted, this proposal will have an August 1st, 2022 effective date. Moving on, Proposal number 2-4 will permit, in the sport of football, a scrimmage against a four-year collegiate institution during spring practice and permit an institution to count the scrimmage as one of the three permissible 11-on-11 scrimmages. Further, A student athlete that participates in a scrimmage against a four-year collegiate institution during spring practice would not use a season of competition, provided the student athlete was academically eligible during the segment in the same academic year that concludes with the NCAA championship. Under current legislation, an institution is allowed 3 sessions that are devoted primarily to 11-on-11 scrimmages. However, it is impermissible for an institution to participate in a scrimmage against an outside team while outside of the playing season. Allowing a Division II institution in the sport of football to participate in a scrimmage against another four-year collegiate institution outside of the playing season will improve the development and retention of football student athletes by providing them with a competitive opportunity against another team. Further, allowing such participation to not count as a season of competition will align football with other fall sports that are permitted to participate during the non-championship segment and not use a season of competition. If adopted, this proposal will have an immediate effective date, which will allow Division II institutions to take advantage of the legislative change for the 2022 spring term. Finally, please note, this will be a football-only vote. Proposal 2-5 will permit an institution to utilize a maximum of 6 credit hours earned during the summer term in a voluntary or optional minor to satisfy the credit hour requirements for meeting progress toward degree. Current legislation does not permit credit hours earned toward a voluntary or optional minor during a summer term to be used to meet progress toward degree requirements after a student athlete is required to designate a degree. In order to avoid this restriction, student athletes sometimes declare their desired voluntary or optional minor as their major for the summer, which causes unnecessary paperwork. Further, classes may only be offered at certain times during the academic year, conflicting with full schedules. This proposal will provide additional opportunities for student athletes to balance their class schedules throughout the year without having a negative impact on meeting progress toward degree requirements. If adopted, this proposal will have an immediate effective date, which will allow student athletes to make enrollment decisions and use those courses to meet progress toward degree requirements for the summer 2022. Proposal 2-6 will establish a required day off from countable athletically related activity. If adopted, this proposal will specify that all countable athletically related activities will be prohibited on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. This proposal will provide student athletes with more opportunities to participate in civic engagement activities such as voting, volunteering, and community engagement. Further, this will allow Division II student athletes the ability to have focused time to civically engage, including time to vote in presidential and some congressional, state, and local elections, and provide them with more opportunities to amplify their voice. Finally, this proposal supports Division II SAC's total package student-athlete goal that encourages student athletes to be well-rounded and exercise their right to vote. If adopted, this proposal will have an August 1, 2022 effective date. Proposal number 2-7 will amend the football preseason and out-of-season athletically related activities legislation in a few ways. If adopted, this proposal will extend the 5-day acclimatization period to 7 days with 1 required day off, establish protective equipment and contact restrictions for the acclimatization period, as well as for preseason activities that occur after the acclimatization period as specified, and finally, it will eliminate the restriction on the number of student athletes per group that may engage in skill instruction. Under current legislation, during the 5-day acclimatization period, an institution is permitted to use helmets only during the first 2 days, helmets and shoulder pads only during the 3rd and 4th day, and full pads during the 5th day. If adopted, an institution will be allowed to use helmets and spider pads only during the first 2 days of practice or testing activity, helmets, shoulder pads, and spider pads only during the next 3 days of practice or testing activity, and full pads on the 6th day of practice or testing activity. Further, this proposal will also require 1 day off during the 7-day acclimatization period, which may occur as early as the 2nd day or as late as the 7th day. If adopted, after the 7-day acclimatization period, but still during the preseason period, an institution must conduct a minimum of 5 practices of helmets only, with the use of spider pads as optional, and may conduct a maximum of 8 on-field practices with full pads. The remaining practices may include helmets only, spider pads being permitted, or helmets and shoulder pads with no tackling to the ground. Additionally, there may be no more than 2 consecutive days of full contact practices and no more than 60 minutes of contact, thud or full, on 2 consecutive days per week. Finally, there may be no more than 75 minutes of full contact in any practice session, excluding scrimmages, and no more than 2 scrimmages during the preseason. Please note, full contact is only permitted during an on-field practice session with full pads. Developed with feedback from multiple stakeholders, including student-athletes, coaches, practitioners, institutional medical personnel, and conferences, the proposed revisions in the football playing and practice season model make several changes to the preseason practice period intended to enhance student-athlete health and safety. The changes to the acclimatization period better align with existing research related to transitioning into football activities. Further, the other revisions reduce the maximum number of full contact practices that could occur during the preseason from 17 to 9 and establish limits on the amount of contact that may occur during the preseason, while retaining flexibility for programs regarding how to structure that period. Finally, the elimination of the skill instruction group size limit aligns football with all other Division II sports and will provide better balance for Division II coaches without negatively impacting student-athlete health and safety. If adopted, this proposal will have an immediate effective date. Please note, if this proposal is adopted, it will render proposal number 2-8 moot, and the membership will not vote on that proposal. This is also a football-only vote. Similar to the last prong of the previous proposal, proposal number 2-8 will eliminate the group size restriction during individual skill instruction outside of the playing season in the sport of football. This proposal will provide an ease of burden for both student-athletes and coaches and will give football student-athletes the same opportunity as student-athletes in other sports that participate in skill instruction or team activities outside of the playing season. Further, limited facilities availability and staffing at the Division II level requires the skill instruction with only 8 student-athletes at a time to be spread out during the day, which may result in the student-athlete practicing at inconvenient times and coaches spending considerable hours on the field. If adopted, this proposal will have an immediate effective date, which will permit Division II institutions and teams to implement these changes for out-of-season skill instruction during the 2021-22 academic year. Please note, if proposal number 2-7 is adopted, this proposal will be rendered moot and will not be voted on by the membership. This is also a football-only vote. The final proposal will allow for an additional processing option for NCAA major violations. Specifically, for those major violations where the involved institution, the involved individuals, and the NCAA enforcement staff agree with the facts and the violations are major, and are willing to negotiate the application of major penalties, the parties may work together to submit a negotiated resolution for the Division II Committee on Infractions review. The proposed penalties would be derived from Bylaw 1952, which is a legislative list of possible penalties for major violations, as well as any relevant Committee on Infractions case precedent. The parties will submit the negotiated resolution to the Committee on Infractions, who may approve the negotiated resolution or reject it. The Committee on Infractions standard of review to reject a negotiated resolution is when the committee considers the negotiated resolution not in the best interests of the association or the penalties are manifestly unreasonable. Following the NCAA Division II Management Council and President's Council review of an increase in Division II major infractions cases in recent years, the NCAA Division II Enforcement and Infractions Task Force was created and charged with studying recent changes to the Division I infractions process and recommending legislative and policy changes to enhance the Division II infractions process. Upon review of the successful implementation of Division I negotiated resolution process, the Division II Enforcement and Infractions Task Force believes adopting the additional processing option will expedite the resolution of infractions cases in which the parties are in complete agreement and would also help ease the financial burden on institutions in the infractions process. Lastly, I will note that this proposal includes an immediate effective date for those involved parties who choose to participate and meet the requirements of the negotiated resolution legislation. Well, there you have it. That concludes the overview of the Division II 2022 NCAA Convention proposals. Please be on the lookout for the 2022 NCAA Convention Division II Legislative Proposals Question and Answer Guide, which will be released in early December of this year, to assist with any questions that you may have. See you in Indianapolis.